Good, thank you. How has the evolution of cancel culture from an instrument for accountability to a mechanism for societal control impacted the balance between freedom of speech and social justice?
Jonathan Biggins.
Oh, God. Cancel
Just
culture.
because you did so many facial expressions, it
I don't
seemed
really
right.
know a great deal about cancel culture because I have no online presence at all. I think social media is the devil's work. And I think
Has anyone tried to cancel you that you've heard about?
Well, they might have. I wouldn't know, unless a concerned friend told me. I think there is a difficulty now. I think some arts organisations, you know, talking in arts and culture terms, I think some are a little hesitant to do things. I think it is time for the artists to take back control of the agenda and for the artists to be able to say, I will make the decisions about what I say and I, as an artist, will interpret what I think society is telling me. I think Billy Connolly had a great line. He said, I don't need anyone to tell me what's funny. I'll know if it's funny when I say it. And if it's not funny, I won't say it again. And I think there is a value in that. And I think there is a value in returning to the creative people the ability to make creative judgments about what society is talking about, where it's going, what's being tolerated, what's changing. And I think there's a danger when an unelected, unrepresentative, vested interest in any particular issue makes people feel nervous about saying things.
Isabel, do you think social media is the devil's work as well?
Look, I think it can be...
Just quoting from someone.
Yeah, it can be a dangerous place, obviously, and I think that people are hesitant to maybe talk about their beliefs and their views. And, you know, I'm an artist and I definitely believe in the things that you're saying, and I know there are other people who are, you know, scared to express themselves. And
Do you feel like people are hesitant to express what they really think?
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is you can express your views and whatever you want to make of your creativity, not online.
Yeah.
I mean, there can be a return to the analogue world.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually it's going to be with AI. The only one you're going to believe, the only way you're going to believe anyone is if you see them in the flesh saying it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a great possibility for the return of live performance, live theatre. I mean, look at what happened with apartheid in South Africa. I mean, the theatre was a vital part of that because it was the only place people could say something. They were very courageous, but they still did it. And I think as AI makes it almost impossible to trust anything you read on the internet, the notion of two people or three people or a group of people listening to someone in a space will become, again, vitally important.
Wow, I like that. It's optimistic. Sort of.
I'm always optimistic.
I mean, firstly, there was the destruction of society, but then the optimism.
Yeah, we've got to move through that and then we rebuild.
We have. Jen, is there a threat that cancel culture does have an impact on people's human rights and expression?
Absolutely. I mean, look at an example that was in the news today. Free speech and social justice is so important, and cancel culture, I think, has been important in accountability, but it's also making people nervous to share things. And if we look at examples here at the ABC, Antoinette Lattouf, who was sacked from the ABC, determined today by the Fair Work Commission, for sharing a tweet from material from Human Rights Watch, an internationally reputable human rights organisation, about the use of starvation as a tool of war by Israel, which is the very thing that Netanyahu is now being sought for prosecution at the ICC. She was sacked from her job for sharing human rights information. That is unacceptable. That ought to be protected by free speech. And frankly, I think there is a real concern about people who are concerned about sharing their views about Palestine because of, and we know from leaked text messages that there was a Zionist lobby campaign to have her removed from the ABC. The ABC did not have the backbone to support her and support the free speech of their journalists. That is a problem in our democracy. But it's not just on Palestine. It's not just on Palestine. I work in the space, I defend women who speak out about gender-based violence. I represented Amber Heard. I have written a whole book about women speaking out about gender-based violence. In the social media, we can't discount the importance of social media as a space for expression. Women who are speaking out are being targeted. And I had people come up to me and say, I was scared to express my view to support Amber Heard because of the onslaught that I would face for speaking out about the violence that I saw. As her lawyer, I got death and rape threats. Every single person who put their head above the parapet to support her, let alone if we talk about what happened to Brittany Higgins in this country. So I think there is a real issue about creating safer spaces to enable anyone to speak out about important human rights issues, whether we're talking about Palestine, whether we're talking about women's experience of domestic and sexual violence.
OK. If you're just joining us, you're watching Q&A Live with Nick Bryant, Kim Hoggard, Parnell, Palme, McGuinness, Jonathan Biggins and Jen Robinson. Plenty to get to tonight. Here's a video question from Josh James.
In the Israel-Hamas war, why is it seemingly so difficult for people to criticise atrocities perpetrated by both sides? If we can't condemn both the rape and murder of Israeli civilians and also condemn actions by Netanyahu and Hamas, which place Palestinian civilians at risk, we risk losing our humanity. Why is it so hard to place our humanity above our tribalism?
Nick, I might start with you there. You've covered wars and this one has really created pretty deep divisions.
Yeah, what happened on October the 7th was grotesque. It was an atrocity. It was a terrorist act. It was appalling. And people should say that and be unafraid to say that. Israel's response has often violated international humanitarian law. That is the clear position of the United Nations. That is the clear position now of the International Criminal Court as well, and we should be unafraid to say that as well. Both of those things are true, but we live in a world where increasingly it's become so polarised that everything is seen as this binary frame. The complexity gets lost, the nuance gets lost, and the idea of holding two apparently contradictory ideas in the head just seems to be something that's gone by the by, and I wish we could get that back, because it's only with having those nuanced conversations and putting in that context and getting away from this binary, polarising framing all the time that we're actually going to have some sort of resolution.
Jen, it's kind of true, isn't it? I mean, two things are true. There have been... The death toll in Gaza is disturbingly high, and there was a terror attack that killed many Israelis on October 7th. Both these things are true, but there is a polarisation in our debate.
We can condemn them both, but the issue is, and I think that, look, more than 1,000 people were killed by Hamas. That was a war crime. We recognise that was a war crime. More than 35,000 people have been killed by Israel. At least they're estimating 10,000 people are missing under rubble who we haven't even determined are dead yet. 85,000 people injured, 1.75 million people displaced. The International Court of Justice issuing an order to say that there is a real risk that genocide is being perpetrated here and ordering Israel to stop, and they are flouting it. That is what we need to be talking about. That is what we need to be talking about. And so a discussion about who condemns who, this is a case about potential genocide. And what's happening to the Palestinian people, it breaks my heart. I can barely look at social media looking what we're seeing coming out of Palestine and Gaza. And so for me, look, yes, we condemn both sides. We can condemn both sides. But this is the onslaught of attacks on the Palestinian people. We have to talk about this.
I think we really do have to talk about it. But more importantly, the reason why nuance in this debate is so important is because we need to get to the bottom of what is actually happening in this region. So, yes, it breaks my heart every death that I see coming out of that region, and social media brings it so close, and it is so hard watching babies and children dead. But we must
and starving
also,
at the moment.
And starving, and all of the terrible things that are happening. But we must also remember that these are people who are being used strategically by the Hamas government of their area. So Hamas has built 360 kilometres of tunnels underneath Gaza. They cost about $1 million per kilometre of tunnel. So millions and millions of dollars have gone into building these tunnels, and do you think a single one is used to protect the people of Gaza? No, they are not. They are used for Hamas to perpetrate its evils on the region. And we need to talk about this with nuance, because we also need to be really clear that it is Hamas who is instrumental in killing these people. Yes, it is Israel who are trying to get to Hamas, and it is a really, really complex situation.
I'm sorry, but this is astonishing. It is Israel that is killing the Palestinian people. Let's talk about the billions of dollars in military aid that go to Israel to support. They have the most. They have the most well-equipped military in the world.
Absolutely.
And yet
that attack happened, and we can absolutely blame Netanyahu for dropping the ball on that, and we should, because he needs to be held accountable.
And even his language, though, it's a mishap. I mean, it's pretty dismissive,
unacceptable, right? Unacceptable. But this is why we would need to go deep into the nuance on this. Like, there have been things which are unacceptable on both sides, but it is so important for us to understand that Hamas are just as responsible for the deaths of these Gazans as every death caused by...
OK, that is... Kim?
I think in all of this discussion, we have to remember the role of leadership. My experience with war was the first Gulf War, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And after 6 months of us traveling around the world to find peaceful diplomatic resolution to remove Saddam from Kuwait, he did not go. And that we worked through the UN, we had all these resolutions, and the final resolution was, any means necessary to remove him. We even went the extra step of meeting with Iraqis prior to the decision to go in. But I will say that the decision was, and of course, George H.W. Bush launched an attack, drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and that was it. The decision was to abide by the UN resolutions, which did not call for the ouster of Saddam Hussein, but there was a real push on the part of many actors in the Middle East, as well as in the U.S. government and allies, for the U.S. and allied forces to continue on into Baghdad and to go after Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi military. The president decided that would not work, and it was not responsible because of the amount of carnage that it would have incurred. It was a 30-day war. If you look at it, just bombs dropping everywhere from U.S. military, and they were massacring poor Iraqi soldiers that weren't even really soldiers that were out in the desert. And the generals at the time, Norman Schwarzkopf and others, advised President Bush that if they continued into Baghdad, there would be a lot of civilian carnage and unnecessary death. And so leadership... Bush took the criticism for that, and eventually, when his son took over as president, and the neoconservative element in the government after 9/11 decided we still need to go into Iraq, and we saw what happened there.
Yep.